Hello, hello! In case you're new here, or have simply forgotten, I'm making a game called BreakBall, a 2 to 8 player top-down PvP action game that's kinda like dodgeball with guns, and the balls bounce a lot. And there's chaos sometimes, watch the last video for that. Now this all started with me making a prototype of the game a couple of years ago, and I'm now working on getting a much expanded and far more polished version of it to an eventual proper release. On another note, BreakBall now has a Discord server, so if you want more frequent updates on the state of the game, or if you want to discuss or ask me something, or even influence choices made on the project, then that's the place to go, link in the description. Since the last video, the game arena has seen some visual improvements, still work in progress mind you, and this is just the first of a couple different arena styles which will be added in eventually, and they'll be completely independent from the wall layouts, of which there will hopefully eventually be over 200. For the background details, I had quite a hard time striking a balance between the game looking pretty, while not distracting from the actual gameplay. More detail, saturation and contrast would make the game look nicer, but at some point it just becomes really hard to see what's happening, especially when there's a lot of stuff happening at once. I'd love to pull out all the stops and have pretty colors and cool details and dynamic background effects, but I also feel like I need to refrain myself from doing that for the sake of gameplay clarity. Hey, if you have any ideas or thoughts on this, you can always come to the Discord server to discuss or give feedback. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Besides that, I've added a main menu to the game, just a very placeholder thing for now. The other options don't do anything yet, but if you press play, you'll be thrown into the player selection screen, which has also gotten quite the facelift since last time, along with a lot of new functionality. There's now a lot more customization options, although these are already in the plans to be changed. There's accessibility options to make the game easier or more accessible for certain players. Some of my family members, at least, have trouble wrapping their head around the twin stick movement and aiming, so the auto aim setting could be useful for them. And if you're playing with a younger sibling, for example, you might decide to give them an extra health point if you wish to give them a chance to not be absolutely annihilated. Now, before I started creating the look for this new menu, I decided it'd be a good idea to actually draw up a concept of what I wanted it to look like. Believe it or not, I've never actually done that before. I've always just kind of started creating the thing in the engine after getting a rough idea of it in my head. That to me has always just kind of felt better. I guess I generally have a hard time feeling productive if I'm not working on the actual physical game, even if I'd save time by doing something else first. This is the mock-up picture I made, and I decided to ditch the color and just focus on information clarity. On the left we have the normal size player cards, and because the game will eventually have up to 8 player support, I also mocked up some more compact versions, which will only be used if there's more than 4 players. This is the in-game result, and I can safely say that making the mock-up first was absolutely worth it. I was able to plan and iterate on the layout really easily until I had something I was happy with, and then I had a reference of what to actually create in the engine, so I wouldn't end up with a result I didn't like, or realize I made a conceptual oversight and have to throw away a bunch of progress and do it differently. I'm honestly shocked it took me 10 years of making games to realize that planning is generally a good idea. Now, these selectors at the top of the mockup, which I've purposefully failed to mention so far, are for changing the gameplay settings, round and chaos modifier amounts in this case. You'll notice that they're not in the final implementation, and that's because while these two fit up here quite nicely, looking at these and thinking about possible gameplay customizations gave me a lot more ideas for different settings I could add. And there was really no elegant way to cram all of them into the player select screen, and so now, once all the players ready up, you'll be thrown here, the game settings menu. Now, not to be confused with the regular settings, this is where you can change game rules and scoring. You can pick from different game presets or even make a custom one yourself and have access to all the settings. Scoring type is the biggest of these. It determines whether you're playing a certain amount of rounds before determining the winner, or if you're just trying to reach a certain score to win, or if you're playing elimination, where you start with a certain amount of health, every time you get hit you lose one, and the last person still in the game wins. Then you can choose your round amount or target score or starting health, how many chaos modifiers you want, how much score a player should get for hitting another player or winning a round, what size arenas you want to play in, and many other things that I haven't implemented yet, like individual target scores or healths, blacklisted maps and chaos modifiers or chaos modifiers that are always on, different tiebreaker types and so on, and then of course a save and a load button. And hey, if you have any ideas for cool settings you'd want me to add, well, you can probably guess by now where you should put them. And so with all this customization and a lot more that may or may not eventually be added, you could make a game mode where you get a point for hitting another player and no points for winning a round, and everyone needs to get to 10 points to win except for Devin, who needs to get to 20 because he's really good at the game for some reason. And there's always 2 random chaos modifiers in addition to teleportation always being on, and Devin always has slippery movement because screw Devin, and if you hit Devin you actually get 7 points instead of 1, and everyone else is in a team against Devin. It's a 7v1, and Devin has a bucket on his head so he can't see anything, and Devin won. What? How is that even possible? Now, obviously there's a lot to think about here, and a lot of opportunities for cool customization, and none of the previously mentioned features are confirmed, mind you, but maybe it would be cool to have an option for individual random chaos modifiers, or having a combination of round amount, target score, and elimination, or being able to be in teams by choosing the same color. And who invited that guy? Yeah, there's a lot of settings that I really want to add, but I don't want the scope of the game to expand forever and end up never actually getting released. So I guess this is all stuff that I'll just have to consider adding in post-release updates, if I still feel like working on the game at that point. Hopefully I do. And speaking of the release, we are getting closer to that, but even though it might not look like it, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be added before it. And I'm actually doing a student exchange to the other side of the world this fall, so I don't know how much time I'll have to work on the game. I'm still gonna, because fixing the UI scaling and adding animations to the transition screen are of higher priority than those pesky once-in-a-lifetime experiences. That being said, I would expect to have the game released at some point next year, depending on how much content and features I end up wanting to add before that. I've had a couple people ask me about releasing a demo for the game. It was a pretty clear and concise no for me back then, but just thinking about how far that release window still is, yeah, I now feel like a closed bug testing beta at some point later on isn't completely off the books. And hey, if it's gonna happen, which I'm not saying it will, but if it does, it's gonna happen on the Discord server. A while back someone also asked me if I could release the prototype for free. I actually ended up not giving them an answer because I was really torn on this. On one hand, I totally get it. It's a really fun game and I can imagine that having to wait for me to finish it sucks. But at the time I wasn't sure if the finished game would actually be expanded enough from the prototype to make it worth waiting for and worth buying if the prototype was available for free. My original plan with the proper game was actually just to make it more stable and add controller assignment. That was it. But now, from where I'm standing, the new game compared to the prototype will have 8 times the amount of maps, about 10,000 times the amount of unique chaos game modes, detailed visual character customization, 2 to 8 player support, a very extensive and customizable game settings menu, better graphics, more refined and responsive core gameplay and physics, and much more that I still want to add both before and after the release, which will make the prototype seem quite puny in comparison. Why is he still here? So, with all that taken into account, the prototype is now available to be played for free in the browser, link in the description. I'm calling it BreakBall Classic as a nod to games like Spelunky Classic and Celeste Classic, since they were conceived in a very similar manner, and because they're cool. Now, if you're interested in playing it, you will need 2 controllers, and you should probably have those plugged in before starting the game, and have any other gamepads unplugged, because it'll basically choose randomly what it considers the player 1 and player 2 controllers. And hey, if you have any issues or feedback on the game, or if you just have a cool clip you want to share, I've made a whole separate category for BreakBall Classic on the Discord server now, and I'd love to see you there. And if not, then I'll see you in the next video. You know, unless the heat death of the universe happens before that. Oh, and also, this video had a lot less technical feature breakdowns as opposed to my previous ones. I wanted to try something different, and now I want to know if it was different bad or different good. You know where to reach me.